to start now, so I think we'll go ahead. Thank you all very much for joining. You will have noticed that we've muted you upon entry, so please do keep yourselves on mute for duration of the talk, but we will have a Q&A session at the end, so you're welcome to either post questions in the chat bar on the right hand side of your screen, and we will try to come to as many as possible later on, and we'll post them to Jonathan, our speaker. Or if we have the possibility, we may ask if you want to unmute yourselves and you can ask the question directly. But for the duration for now, please do keep yourselves muted. You're welcome to chat or post any messages in the chat bar. And as always, thank you very much for supporting Plotbot. We hope you enjoy the evening. Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Lucia. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our members and supporters. It's great to see so many familiar names following our very successful Falkland Islands Museum event that we hosted a couple of weeks ago. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Jonathan Hall from the RSPB. For those of you who have been around in Footbot for a while, you'll remember Jonathan has spoken at some of our past events. And we, as a charity, we're very pleased to work in partnership with the RSPB on their Gough Island project, where we raised around £2,000 back in, if memory serves me right, 2018. And Jonathan is happy to take any questions on the Gough Island work as well at the closure of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you now, Jonathan, and welcome, and thank you for coming tonight. And over to you, Jonathan. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me share this with you, which is hopefully coming up, if it hasn't come up already.
Yeah, it's that.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see names old and new, and in particular, wonderful to see that Tristan is here with us tonight. This is the wonderful new world of improved connectivity, and a real privilege that we actually can have Tristan join us in person as well. So hopefully you'll be able to field questions with me at the end, if you wouldn't mind. For those who I don't know, I head up the Overseas Territories team at the RSPB. And I'm going to talk tonight about our work supporting Tristan da Cunha with their Marine Protection Zone, which was announced to global fanfare, delight, and a general feeling of wow last November. So Tristan is in the southern South Atlantic, one of several UK overseas territories in the South Atlantic here, all shaded in blue and representing the combined marine estate of the UK and the overseas territories, which together make up the 5th largest marine estate on the planet. So a huge responsibility, especially for these small communities with vast marine zones. More specifically and closer, there are 3 islands in sort of the northern cluster, Tristan da Cunha, Inaccessible and Nightingale, and then Gough Island further to the south. And above all, it is very special as the home of the world's most remote community. The settlement pictured here of Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, home to the sort of 250 odd Tristanians. And it is a real privilege to work with this community, and I've got to sort of visit and get to know them and become friends over the last few years, and a real honour to get to work alongside them. And I'll come back to the community in more depth shortly, but first, just to provide a little bit of the environmental context and explain why the RSPB is sort of working with Tristan da Cunha in particular. This map again shows their marine zone, and in particular is important just for showing in those 3 different gradated colours, effectively different oceanic zones, and with this major current that runs through the middle and creating incredible sort of dynamic, moving, churning, and consequently rich system, and sailing from the Northern Islands down to Gough, you know, if you do it overnight, you go to sleep, and certainly when I did it, the sea was blue, and woke up in the morning near Gough and the sea was green, and just crossing over into that different area and all that extra you know, algae and plankton material in the water, just incredible diverse marine ecosystem. And from an RSPB perspective, so important as an incredible hotspot for seabirds. So 4 unique species, including the rather beautiful Atlantic yellow-nosed albatross, the world's largest population of another 5 seabird species, 25 species breeding there in total, and over 20 million seabirds calling Tristan home. These range from the beautiful and critically endangered Tristan albatross, pictured here on Gough Island, where work is currently underway in partnership with the Tristan government to eradicate mice and ensure this species doesn't disappear forever, and ensure that we get to see sites like this in future, the incredible mating rituals of these ginormous birds when walked up to in the flesh. My personal favourite of mine, one of the other unique species of the archipelago, the spectacled petrel. And walking around it just feels like a different planet. You've got these beautiful ferns and these incredibly charismatic albatross chicks sat on their pedestal nests. Though woe betide anyone who does get a little bit too close, as you may well end up with what looks like fire in this photo, but is a stream of rather putrid, fishy vomit as a defense mechanism. Now, the sounds and sights of the Tristan group are pretty hard to describe, but the most sort of evocative and powerful for me is that sight at dawn of dusk, when, you know, potentially millions of seabirds are coming in to roost overnight, and the skies darken, and you can just hear thuds all around you as birds hit the ground and then start scuttling around to burrows. And unfortunately, no picture can possibly do it justice, but the sheer volume of life is utterly incredible. Moving closer to the shores and our marine destination, the incredibly charismatic northern rockhopper penguins, vast majority of the population found here in the Tristan group. And then also the vast majority of subantarctic fur seals, and all those darker splodges in the distance, the pups, which at the right time of year make the boulders just look like they're moving as they all congregate and play in their nurseries, or take over little rock stacks offshore in their vast numbers, or indeed meet you offshore in the famous and beautiful golden kelp forests that surround much of these islands. And these are a very pristine ecosystem, celebrated as such. Someone's just come off mute, I think. But with a whole host of wildlife in great abundance. And most famously of all, with Tristan lobsters dotting the sea floor, and not like you may see when diving in many other places of the world, with an occasional lobster just poking its head very timidly out from a crevice, but really littering the sea floor in some places, and boldly sat on rocks in huge abundance and confidence. And this forms the basis of a Marine Stewardship Council certified fishery, upon which the community heavily depends. This is actually me cheekily putting in a photo of a couple of the Tristanians researching, and less expert audiences may think that they are lobster fishing, but with the audience here today, I won't sort of pretend they are doing exactly that. But the point really here is that the Tristanian communities incredibly connected to and dependent upon the sea and the marine resources therein, and have been managing them sustainably for many decades. And so this is the community taken from up above on the volcano. You can see in particular of note the very sort of small and exposed harbour, for many days of the year inoperable due to very large seas, and not a harbour that provides sufficient protection to leave boats in the water, but something where everything has to be sort of removed and brought onto land. And again, from the new volcano, another perspective of this community. And this is a community that long before the RSPB was ever involved in the Tristan group, has been leading the way with its own conservation programs, most notably and sort of internationally recognized for protecting some of their offshore islands. So Gough Island, as mentioned, established as a World Heritage Site for basically being one of the most pristine temperate island ecosystems left anywhere on the planet. Now highly protected, and with just a small South African weather station situated at one end of the island. And then that World Heritage Site extending also to Inaccessible Island in the Northern Group, also now heavily protected, obviously here living up to its name of inaccessibility, but featuring at the top this this vast plateau. And this valley that you can see off to the right is actually the main breeding site for that unique spectacled petrel that I showed you earlier, which breeds primarily in burrows in this view. And the smell on a warm day when you're walking around of sort of the rich fruity smell of these seabirds is really incredible. And the RSPB started working about 20 years ago with the Tristan community, and then in particular worked with the government to establish the Tristan Conservation Department in 2006, I believe, and has been supporting the staff and leadership of that department ever since. This is Trevor Glass, the head of conservation, and someone that we provide technical assistance to, funding support and partnership working. So hopefully that presents a bit of a picture for you all of Tristan and its marine assets at the start of this process. And I want to just sort of jump away now to sort of explain the origins of the marine protection zone and this Blue Belt program within which it sits. But one of the main sort of genesis factors really was the launch of this coalition of 6 NGOs back in late 2014, formed and launching early 2015, really calling on the UK government to live up to that responsibility and opportunity that comes from having such a large marine estate, and putting the technical support and funding support in place to enable territories to protect their vast zones, and really starting in a place where a lot of territories felt very, I think helpless is probably an opposite word in terms of just how large their zones were, and a feeling of helplessness from, in particular, the threat of illegal fishing, with boats being able to sort of come in, take their marine resources and leave, and no real recourse or ability for these small territory communities to do anything about it. But really in the global context of increasing satellite ability and technical measures, that now was the time that actually decent protections could be put in place so that territory governments and communities could actively manage their marine zones. And this coalition kicked off with a flurry of events and communications and parliamentary activities, and in particular led to a whole bevy of manifesto commitments in the May 2015 general election. Obviously, most importantly, the commitment in the winning manifesto of the Conservative Party, which was to create a blue belt to protect precious marine habitats around the 14 overseas territories, with the crucial wording in there, subject to local support and environmental need. And this is then, we'll jump back to Tristan itself. And this is where the local leadership and the far-sighted Tristanian culture really came into its own. But the picture at the top is the then Island Council from 2016 to 2019, having a lot of very careful deliberations about whether this proposed Blue Belt programme was something that it wanted to take part in, wariness in Tristan, and indeed in quite a few other territories, about whether this would be something that would end up with the UK government imposing a one-size-fits-all sort of marine protection proposal, or some other sort of inappropriate kind of fit for local territory desires. So the council picture at the top, and then the then Chief Islander, bottom middle, Ian Lavarello, having many decisions and discussions in this period. On the bottom right is James Glass, now Chief Islander, and then a councillor and the head of the Fisheries Department. And then bottom left is the RSPB's Tristan community lead, Andy Schofield, who visiting the island in 2015 and 2016, and did a big role in liaising between UK government officials and Tristanian council and community, and really sort of helping the community come to their decision on whether to participate in the Blue Belt programme or not. And between the 2015 election, there was another year and a third pretty much until the Blue Belt programme formed, and a lot of very hard consideration happened in that period. But over a year later, Alan Duncan, then Foreign Office Minister, launched the Blue Belt programme, and 7 territories had decided to participate. Commitment overall to protect 4 million square kilometres of ocean, and the UK government announced £20 million of funding. And the wording that Tristan Council finally decided upon was to create a marine protection regime across their entire zone, ensuring that that would be community-led, science-based, and driven by local needs. I think in particular, thinking of economic needs in this context. So that then laid out a whole timetable, or indeed a timetable that needed to be decided upon to work out what was needed to make that decision by 2020. And one of the first next steps was a joint expedition that took place with Tristan government, the National Geographic Pristine Seas programme, and RSPB, a science and communications and engagement expedition in early 2017. This is a photo of the decent majority of the team members all standing, meeting the Tristan Council, seated here in the council chamber, upon arrival to introduce the work programme and make sure it was delivering upon Tristan's priorities. And as I say, a big mixture of sort of cutting edge and discovery science, looking to establish records and sort of map and quantify Tristan's marine riches. So diving and quantification of that inshore marine ecosystem as pictured here. Then using cameras, GoPros, in fact, mounted in waterproof casings. So in the metal T under Chris's arm, you've got two cameras, and in the bait bucket on the far left of this photo, some nice smelly fish, and using that as a sort of non-lethal means of filming and recording and sampling, and these left out to float for set hours in various locations around the archipelago. That produced one of the most interesting findings of the expedition, was just how dense the population of blue sharks were. This is one photo bombing from the side, a large female blue shark predominantly being the ones most photoed, and intriguingly very small and young blue sharks, leading to the position that this is likely an important blue shark pupping ground and nursery area in Tristan's waters, and some initial tracking done of a number of large female blue sharks to learn a little bit more about their life cycle, and from what area across the South Atlantic are these fish converging on Tristan in order to pup. Likewise, a very carefully netted South Atlantic fur seal in position to have a tracking device glued and one that would fall off relatively quickly to its fur on its back to discover where in the marine zone these species were going, in particular to see if there's any important hotspots for them to inform the science base of the Tristanian decision. Another big piece, this contraption in the middle of the photo was a deep sea camera able to drop down to great depths and film the marine life at the bottom. And one of the other most important aspects of this expedition was really sort of engaging the community, and it was a very fun day having a large proportion of the Tristanian school on board the expedition vessel to be talked through the various activities. Now, this was all filmed, and one of the other big pieces that National Geographic was able to bring was their incredible resources in photography and cinematography, and bringing this all together in a film to bring to life for those Tristanians unable to dive and see their incredible territory underwater, or indeed who hadn't been fortunate enough to visit all of their off islands, and just bring to life all the riches of this territory for them. And the editor pulled, I think, several all-nighters at the end of this trip to quickly produce a highlights reel. And I think it was probably everyone's highlight of the expedition was a really large party basically at the very end of the expedition, in which this highlights reel of all of the film taken was sort of shown, just to help showcase immediately for the community the treasures that they had there. So sorry, I just had my battery's not quite working, but I think it should be fine. Many expeditions do disappear off into the night, and many territories have had very many bad experiences of sort of people coming, doing things and leaving and not providing that information back. So it was really fantastic to be able to share those highlights at the precise moment. Moving on from that, there was one of the key pieces of the Blue Belt program was establishing a whole new program of work in two UK government agencies, CFAS focused on sort of science and fishery science in particular, and the Marine Management Organisation with its name explaining its role. And all of these organisations came together with the Tristan government to try and help work out the next steps towards 2020. And this was a big driver of the work programme of CFAS and the MMO, and multiple expeditions that they've done subsequently in 2018 and 2019, I believe, to Tristan, to try and help build that science base. The RSPB role on some of the further science was to try and bring together all of the tracking data from seabirds and subantarctic fur seals, just to truly try and show where the most important areas of the marine zone were for wildlife. And you can see a kind of all sorts of different areas coming up, but the darker the colour, the more it was important across all seasons for wildlife species. One of the questions that's often asked, and also I don't have the capacity to highlight all of the great work of MMO and CFAS, one of the questions that is often asked is around the monitoring and enforcement. And I just wanted to show one satellite image, and this is a sort of a composite showing over multiple years fishing vessel activity, basically. And you can see areas that are hotspots down to the south east of the zone, outside of it, for largely for the Japanese bluefin, and also where there was a small Tristanian fishery operating on some of Tristan's sort of eastern seamounts, the larger red blobs, but really able to sort of show that actually the illegal fishing wasn't at this stage as big a problem as had been feared by some, and then actions in place to sort of act on the intelligence and work towards enforcement. There were obviously a lot of elections in the last 5 years, and the commitment to making sure that funding and support from the UK government on the science, on the technical support, on this centralised satellite enforcement was really important to maintain. And so that was a big focus of our Great British Oceans work, and securing more manifesto commitments. The big highlight in 2018 on the back of public support for and sort of interest in our marine environment on the back of Blue Planet 2, when we got 265 MPs to support the Blue Belt Charter, and that was the most MPs supporting any single environment ask since the Climate Then Bill of 2004. So huge cross-party support, and then really importantly in 2019 securing the extra 7 million to fund this current financial year's work. And then a big piece of work that the RSPB has led with this partnership across the board to also put in place an endowment fund to support the community going forwards in both its environmental and marine management, and also sort of community sustainable development. That was another sort of big piece of this puzzle that brought together all sorts of actors from across the UK government, from across the sort of philanthropic and private sectors as well. And after all that, we get to Tristan's incredible leadership results. And last November, the announcement of the 4th largest fully protected marine reserve in the planet, the largest in the Atlantic, an area of just shy of 700,000 square kilometres, fully protected. And you can see the darker blue, the fully protected areas, and in the lighter blue, ongoing sustainable fishing zones. And the work obviously doesn't stop there. There is now a lot to do, both supported by MMO and CFAS and ourselves, with Tristan leading, to make sure that this vast marine protection zone gets off to the best possible start and is managed well. And we're really excited to be leading a project with Tristan called Atlantic Guardians, which really, I think, hopefully espouses the leadership role that Tristan is playing for the entire South Atlantic basin. This is an entrepot, a hotspot for wildlife that converges on Tristan and then disperses right across the South Atlantic Ocean. And in that way, the Tristanian community are Atlantic Guardians, and we're super excited to be starting this large-scale 3-year project funded by the Blue Nature Alliance to help Tristan set this marine protection zone off. So to bring that to life a little bit further, I've just got a very, very short 90-second film that celebrates Tristan's leadership. Get off that, oops, sorry. So to finally just place Tristan's amazing announcement into context, just wanted to sort of look back out to this wider Blue Belt program that has been established over the last 5 years and now protecting incredibly over 1% of the world's oceans through the leadership of these various territory governments and support of the UK. And as we work towards looking likely later this year, commitments by UK government and others, hopefully to agree that we will aim as a global community to protect 30% of the world's oceans. This leadership is vitally important as giving the UK the credibility to advocate for that 30% target on the world stage, and also really just to show that we are collectively doing our piece. But obviously the real weight of who is doing this piece is the territory governments themselves, protecting this incredible array of wildlife. So there are many, many thank yous required. It's obviously, thank you to Tristan for working with us. Thank you to National Geographic, to the UK government agencies, and to all our partners, and in particular to the team at RSPB as well. Have done so much of work. It's very much been a team effort from start to finish, and I would be very happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. That's really interesting and great to hear about the latest developments following the changes in the marine protection zone. So yeah, let's go to see if we hopefully we've got a few questions. I'll pass over to Lucia, who I think normally runs this bit. Lucia.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Jonathan. I suppose I've got a few questions. We've only got one in the chat bar for now, but it's related to Gough Island, so maybe we'll ask that towards the end. But just in relation to the presentation that you just held, what was the biggest challenge that you'd say you had throughout this project?
I think in some ways it's always communications, and that there are so many different actors here, making sure that there's really good communications, obviously primarily with Tristan, with the different parts of UK government, with the other NGOs, with the different philanthropic partners, and and there, with so many different actors, there's always, unfortunately, yeah, potential for balls ups, misunderstandings. Yeah, you know, so much comes down to communication issues. So above all, you know, the most important challenge to make sure we were always on top of was maintaining really open, honest, constant communications. And we didn't always get it right. But I hope we always, yeah, quickly corrected whenever we did make a mistake.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, I definitely agree. Stakeholder engagement all the way for any sort of change programs. I suppose my next question is in relation to the funding. Was there any particular source of funding which was the largest to be able to make this happen?
So, I mean, well, obviously, I mean, the UK government commitment has been, you know, vast and really important, and you know, it's really important that that continues, because the whole basis on which these small territory governments have established these really large zones is on the basis that there is going to be that centralised UK government support for the monitoring and enforcement and surveillance, and that's the only cost-effective way that it can happen. There simply isn't the capacity for lots of separate communities to try and you know, manage these vast zones alone. So that commitment's been hugely important, and you know, I think it's incumbent on us as the sort of NGO community with our public communications outreach tools to make sure that these places are both celebrated, but also that you know, the political momentum is maintained to continue that funding and support. But then there's also things that that governments can't fund. So that's where philanthropic funding can be really helpful to you know, address other particular issues that are impossible for government, but actually perfectly within the remit of philanthropic finance.
Super, thank you.
Sorry, just before we go to the next question, I do want to just particularly, and again, thank everyone for attending this, but I see we have the Tristan UK representative, Chris Carnegie, with us, and we have an individual, Fiona Kilpatrick, who is, I believe, zooming in from Tristan. So just a special welcome to you both, and really, yeah, fantastic to have you with us. Sorry, back to you, Lucia.
No worries. Leo, thank you for putting your hand up. If you would like to unmute yourself, then go ahead if your question's related to this.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, one of the other participants has raised the question of the mice on Gough Island, and I know you're going to deal with that. But I've followed the sort of Tristan da Cunha story for some time. And there are, of course, other invasive species which threaten the, if you like, the indigenous creatures and indeed the vegetation. What are the islanders or the British government or the RSPB doing on the wider ecological protection front from, in particular, invasive species?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good one. I think the most important thing to say is prevention is always cheaper and better than cure. And Tristan is actually, at this very moment, working on new biosecurity legislation, which is going to be fantastic. And we've also got a project working in Cape Town and with the various stakeholders and actors there to make sure that there is, you know, pre-border stronger biosecurity controls in place to make sure that you know, potential invasive species are stopped as early on as possible. Plus, then there is a biosecurity lead on Tristan who can do checks at the end of voyages, and certainly with our Gough program, it's a really big piece of work to make sure that there is no reintroductions of mice or indeed any other species. So that's you know, in two parts. We've got our whole operational biosecurity plan and making sure that all of the infrastructure and equipment we're taking out and all the teams are thoroughly checked and biosecure, and that we ourselves aren't guilty of any introductions. And then working on this longer term piece of work, supporting Tristan with their biosecurity legislation and practice, and also making sure that the South African side, which unfortunately is particularly hard in this COVID world, as South Africa is a country that's been hit particularly hard by COVID, but we are tentatively scheduling a workshop in Cape Town for the second half of this year, where we hope to bring together all the various stakeholders again there to talk about those pre-border areas of biosecurity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
I
Jonathan.
don't know if Tristan wants to come in on any of that or at all. But otherwise,
I do think, as you've pinpointed, it's a constant battle, and of course, as you know, invasive species are often introduced to remote environments unwittingly by, well, cruise ships, for example, or visitors who are arriving by sea. They can create that issue. So it's something that as environmentalists we need to be on top of all the time, or as much as we can at least.
We've just had a question come through from Gus Eldridge.
Yeah, just wondering, how does one get to Tristan? What's the easiest way to get there?
Spaceship.
Probably at the moment.
so well, it's never been easy, and sadly it's more difficult than ever at the moment, but it's 7-ish days by boat from Cape Town. There's fishing boats, or once a year the South African government research vessel visits as part of a kind of resupply voyage to Gough Island. Unfortunately, one of the fishing vessels actually sunk last year, so there is a great reduction in that line, and with all the various needs of COVID and quarantine, it is been particularly tough to get Tristanians on and off, or the cargo in particular, and food and everything needed. So I think it will be, when cruise ships get going again, that is probably the most realistic way for tourists to visit the island, and obviously a great need for in light of the reduction in the fishing vessel links, to work out new mechanisms or means of access to Tristan. But it's one of the biggest, difficultest, most existential questions I think the territory faces.
Yeah, I saw there was a Nightingale Island on your map. How would one get there?
Hey, can I?
Please, Fiona.
Thank you, Jonathan. Right, in terms of getting to Tristan, we are very limited in that we have 8 sailings a year, which have 12 berths. So very limited. If you want to go to Nightingale, you have to come here, and then it depends on the weather. A lot in Tristan depends on the weather. So you could come here, be here, and get off your boat, and then you could sit here for a week and then not get to Nightingale, and you'd have to go away again. My husband, who is my joint administrator, managed to get to Inaccessible a couple of weeks ago, and that was amazing. There are Tristanians who've lived all their lives on this island who have never been to Inaccessible. It is really hard and very challenging.
What about doctors and dentists and medical services for them?
Right, okay, we have doctors. We have 2 doctors who are funded by what was DFID, UK aid. Dentists, we again funded by UK aid. We have 1 a year, except last year we didn't have 1. And we're hoping to get 1 here this year. The last year has been really, really challenging because A, COVID, obviously, B, losing one of the 2 ships that supplies us has been a massive challenge, because we rely on the company that has the lobster fishing concession, and they're a bit torn because part of what they do is providing us with passengers and cargo, but they make their money from the fishing concession. So it has been really challenging. We don't have COVID on the island, but that doesn't mean that COVID hasn't affected us. And having the combination of COVID and the ship that sank has been really, really difficult for us. We're quite vulnerable.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Jonathan, if I may, we've got another question in the chat bar. It says, Tristan's chief islander challenged other leaders to follow the island's example. What's your realistic best hope for worldwide ocean protection? Well, a big question there.
Can I take that, Jonathan?
Sorry, Fiona?
Shall I start?
Yeah, please. Absolutely.
I'll start and you take on. The fact is that if you look around the world on marine protected areas, Tristan is a leader, and people look at the overseas territories and they think we are sort of beggars with our hands out hoping for sport. But the reality is that Tristan and Ascension and St. Helena and Pitcairn have all put in place marine protection areas, and we are in the vanguard. And it is really important that you recognize this. And what James said was incredibly powerful, I think. He said, you know, if we can sit here with 250 people and put this marine protection zone in place, then the rest of the world really needs to look at us and think about what they're doing, because we don't have the resources they have. It's really important that they look at us and they follow our lead.
Yeah, he did a brilliant piece of communications there to James. I think just on some other thoughts is that there are now 55 odd countries that have joined the various sort of high ambition coalitions or global ocean alliances committed to this global target of 30% ocean marine protection. And I think this next decade is going to see a lot more marine protection, and that there is, you know, there will be challenges and setbacks and things will go slower than we need to, but I think and you know, few will be as large as Tristan's, as few places have such large exclusive economic zones, but I think we will see many more marine protected areas in the coming years.
Can I just selfishly ask a question? Has Governor Philip Rushbrook, has he been able to visit Tristan?
I'll take that. No, he hasn't. For the simple reason that COVID has closed down. Now, there used to be a ship between St. Helena and Tristan. That's gone. And he has, I know personally that he's really frustrated that he hasn't been able to come here because the current air bridge or flights come from the UK via Accra to St. Helena, but the South African air bridge has gone. And I know that he really wants to come here, but he hasn't been able to.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Yeah, because our last physical event we held in London was with Governor Rushbrook in December 2019. I just remember him expressing his desire at that time to get over to Tristan. So hopefully he may well make it, depending how things go. I know I think he went to Ascension not too long ago. I think he's made it to Ascension Island, but
he did. He's just come back from, he was in the UK, he came back to Ascension, and now he's just gone back to St. Helena. Yeah, he is very, very keen to come here.
We'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you. Sorry, Lucia, I'll let you back to you if we've more questions. We've got 5 more minutes. Yeah.
One more question I've got here. In terms of the enforcement of the for example, the marine protection zone, is that handled by the territories themselves, or is that more by the UK government?
So I'd say it's both. I think there's, a few different pieces that might helpful maybe to pull apart. There's a big deterrence effect, just first of all from these announcements, from understanding and promotion of the fact that there is satellite surveillance, that there is centralized intelligence in the UK government pulling all this together and outreach upon it. Then there is the work by territory governments to report sightings, have enforcement of regulated fishing activity, to be there trained for any thing that may happen in inshore waters, and in the offshore waters that is obviously much more difficult, and that's where remote surveillance is currently one of the main methodologies, and there's a lot of innovative trialing of different technologies under the Blue Belt program in different territories that are sort of helping build that picture together. But the really difficult sort of ultimate place to get to is a successful prosecution, and that does require therefore the in that legal jurisdiction capacity, or potentially in St. Helena, I would have thought for Tristan, and that is where things are very difficult. But it has been very heartening to see all the results of surveillance and monitoring work today, that certainly for Tristan, illegal fishing isn't nearly as big a threat as many feared 5-6 years ago.
Fantastic, thank you, Jonathan. Those are all the questions from me. Philip, do you have any more on your end?
I do not myself, but I will just ask at this point, if anyone wants to ask a question, please just unmute yourself and go ahead. So Joe O'Farrell, I see you've got your hand up. Feel free to.
Thank you, Philip. Can I be heard now?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Following on from what Leo McKee was saying earlier on about Gough Island and invasive species, can I put a little question to Jonathan, which has always puzzled me. When I was last on Tristan 21 years ago, on the Agulhas from Cape Town to Tristan, I found myself in the company of 5 or 6 scientists from the UK and South Africa who were going to Gough Island to see could they eradicate a rogue grass, which was known to have hit Gough, and it was alleged it was sent there in the droppings of seabirds and albatrosses. Now, my question is, a roe grass that is dropped in the droppings of birds, that is nature. Why should that count as an invasive species requiring eradication?
That is a good question. So trying to think what it might have been. The main work on an invasive plant on Gough has been on a small plant called procumbent pearlwort, or Sagina procumbens, which is that almost certainly came attached in seeds to the bottom of containers from wharfs in Cape Town, and that was a man-made introduction, and has had a devastating impact on some of South Africa's kind of equivalent latitude subantarctic islands. I mean, I would agree with you. That there are new introductions by nature that we wouldn't therefore conceive of necessarily as an invasive alien species. So whether that was the sort of the scientific hypothesis at the time, or what, I'm afraid I'm not sure, but it certainly hasn't been, as from my memory, and someone else on this call may correct me, actually any completed eradication of any sort of roe grass from, and indeed a grass eradication can be fiendishly difficult depending on how long their seeds survive in the ground.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to ask a question? Please do so now. Oh, okay, I think we'll well, it's just gone 9 p.m, so that's officially our end. So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining in for what I think has been a really interesting talk. My personal thanks again to you, Jonathan, and yeah, it's been really good to catch up with you through this event, and it's also been really nice to hear from Fiona, based in Tristan, because that's, despite all the challenges we've had over the past year, I would say for FOTBOT as a charity, a key benefit out of all this has been the fact we are engaging more directly through the use of Zoom with the overseas territories. So we are thankful for that. I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't point out our online shop. We do, Gus, who's on the call tonight, runs that. So if anyone's interested, we still have quite a few books on the overseas territories to do with their conservation. Stuart McPherson's BBC Three documentary, that's his book. We've worked in partnership with Stuart and have delivered a copy of this book to well over 20,000 primary schools across the United Kingdom. And we've also sent copies to several overseas territories. So if you do want a copy yourself, please do go on our shop. And we've also got couple of DVDs on matters close to, I would say, Jonathan's heart, all to do with conservation and the environment in the overseas territories. So on that note, I think last thing to do is just state that our next event will be on, Lucia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Thursday, the 22nd of April.
Yeah,
we will be
correct.
hosting, we have a question and answer discussion with the Governor of Gibraltar, I believe Sir David Steele. So we look forward to welcoming you all to our next event with the Governor of Gibraltar. And please do, Fiona, if you speak to Governor Philip anytime soon, please do pass on FOTBOT's best. And we thank him for his speaking to 120 guests in London when we were all allowed to congregate, which seems like a lifetime ago. But otherwise, that's it from FOTBOT. So thank you all, have a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next event next month. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Keep safe, everyone.
Fiona.
Bye-bye.
Right.